advice would you give like to people now who wants to start their own business, wants to start being a freelance, moving like from the traditional 9 to 5 job to being an entrepreneur?
I would say to go all in. I know a lot of people who, I would say are destined to be entrepreneurs and maybe they're stuck or hesitant. And I think that my biggest recommendation would to be, if you can, right, if means allow, and if it's possible, then to really put yourself out there and dive headfirst into entrepreneurship. I think that's the best way to go about it. If you have the mindset of continued learning and continued networking, I think that it's harder to fail that way,
Hi and welcome, Delaney. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast and for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob.
How are you doing these days?
Honestly, really good. Really good. I've recently gotten into yoga, so that's how I started today as well. And the days have been calm, so I'm happy about that. Still busy with work, but it's more balanced, I would say. And you, how are you finding things?
I'm pretty fine, and yeah, looking forward to our conversation. We have been talking for a while already to have this conversation, and finally we had, yeah, found like time in the day to do it. And I want to start with the first question. If someone would met you without knowing your work and what you have achieved and everything, what would you want them to understand about you?
It's a good question. And I think kind of like what you were just talking about, obviously more of the personal side, I would hope to lead with that, right? I've been working for 8 years in creative production in the creative industry, most recently in new media. But I think if I was meeting someone for the first time, I would hope to just come off as most myself as possible,
Mm.
Kind of like when we met. I think you reached out on LinkedIn and just sparked a conversation, talked about, entrepreneurship and what you're passionate about, what you're excited about. And yeah, I'm quite a people person when it comes to both the personal and professional side of things. And so I hope that would be the first impression.
You're quite calm, so I think that's a very good sign. But what is taking up like the most mental space for you recently?
Yeah. So I think for me, the tech side of things, or just existing and working in the digital world, has been really consuming and it's hard to turn off.
Mm.
So yeah, you've caught me on a calm day, but I would say even last night I was up until 10:30 on my computer,
Yeah.
which says a lot since I'm quite a morning person. So
Okay.
I think it's really easy to just stay online and to whether it's scrolling or working or answering emails or watching videos, reviewing things. I think it's a bit hard for me to turn off, especially when it comes to the work side of things.
But that means also that you're really enjoying your work and what you do.
That is true. Fair, yeah, fair way to put it, and I think you're spot on. I don't mind working all hours. Obviously, there needs to be some balance, hence the yoga, but I, no, I think it's enjoyable, but it's also, it is important to detox a bit when it comes to the
Yeah.
digital side.
Yeah, totally get that. Even more, it's when you work on your own and you're freelancer or entrepreneur. I think it's sometimes difficult to stop yourself and give yourself a break and etc. Yeah. Well, you mentioned already like new media. Maybe you can explain a bit what is like the difference between old media and new media. I think many people, I guess, are not so aware about the difference.
Yeah, sure. Sure, and it's still, I would say, still evolving, still something I'm trying to
Mm.
figure out and learn about, but I would describe old media as traditional media, what you think of with television and, local stations or channels, and then more, the new media side of things would be mostly YouTube in my world. That's how I define it, but it's also social media and I would say more of the fast-paced side of things and maybe a bit more of the authentic side.
Okay. And you started initially like in the traditional media and then you moved into the new media, was there something that felt misaligned, or what was your the decision behind that move? And
Sure. Yeah. So I started out at a creative agency. Even before that, I was an extra. So I thought maybe acting would be my thing. And that changed very
nice.
quickly. And I got behind the camera after my first gig as an extra. And then I worked essentially with creative agencies and production companies back in the US. And then I moved to Warner Bros. And Discovery, which now potentially Netflix owned, you know. It's
Mhm.
always shape-shifting, but that was a really, really cool place to grow and learn from, definitely more of the traditional side. And I worked in branded entertainment, which means writing and producing 15 to 30-second commercials
Okay.
that are promoting television shows or, you know, movies, that kind of thing. So I was super, super fun and I worked with an incredible team. And what I noticed is that there was always this feeling of flux, right? And so for me, it was a lot of corporate standards that had to be, you know, followed, which makes sense, right? In that setting, a lot of different rounds of revisions and rounds of review by a lot of people that I had never met. And then a lot of layoffs, candidly. You know, it's, yeah, quite a volatile space. And in new media, very fast paced, and things do change and move like that. But I find it to be more direct, you know? So, for example, after Warner Bros., I worked at MrBeast YouTube channel back in the US. And that was a mile a minute, you know, working on the most insane, fun projects. And I learned a lot very, very fast.
Okay.
So super grateful for that. And since then I haven't really turned back, but I found myself working in a blend of, you know, branded content, but still for YouTube or for, you know, new media channels or for creators themselves.
How did that opportunity come up working with MrBeast?
LinkedIn, how
Really?
crazy is that? Just it's the same as this podcast,
Wow.
honestly. Yeah, I got a message, thought it was a scam. It was not. And a few weeks later, I moved down to North Carolina and yeah, the rest is history.
So you worked in directly for his team?
Yeah, so I was a creative producer and I worked directly with, we called it Team B. So there was two different production teams and I worked on main channel content. So long form videos like $1 to $500,000 plane ticket or the world's most expensive plane tickets, that kind of thing. And worked with incredible, incredible creatives and producers and editors. Yeah, it was a really cool place to be.
Okay. So how long did you work there, and then when did you move?
Yeah, so I worked there for about 6 months. It was a speed run, and then I essentially moved back to Maryland, and I freelanced for a while, worked with Hilton Hotels on their YouTube channel, and then I, in the meantime, had been trying to make a move to Europe for a while, and it was tough in the industry because it's, I would say, less prevalent here. Here now being Europe, right? I now live in Brussels, and so it was a bit of new territory, and also have to acknowledge I'd been in, you know, essentially a creative funnel for years. And so I decided to go back to school and learn. And so I got an MBA here in Brussels.
You said that you started also freelancing, so that was actually so kind of the first step into entrepreneurship. How did that come up?
Yeah. So for freelancing, I would say it was quite a natural transition. Even at MrBeast, I was a contractor. Yeah,
Ah,
with most clients, it's especially in this industry. Even at Warner Bros. Discovery, I was a contractor. So in all of these environments, I was working basically full time, but in a way that
mhm.
I was managing it myself, basically. And then when I had the freedom to take on more projects at once, then it really introduced the side of, you know, entrepreneurship, freelancing, you could say, or, you know, the type of freelancing where you really have to run work like a business, you know? And then, yeah, I started the same here in Brussels. So I started a creative agency that I now work through.
What did you learn, or what were the lessons from like all this working Mr. Beast and more in the or Warner Bros. Like in a more corporate environment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. As far as lessons that I've learned from, yeah, from I would say my experience working before I moved abroad, before I learned a lot of life lessons from all of that, I really learned about, you know, how to collaborate with a team, especially on the production side, and what, you know, wearing all the hats means, when to share the hats, that kind of thing. But in a very true sense, production is a space that requires so much collaboration. Um, and it's a really cool place to be. Um, and there's also a lot of ownership over the work, but also it's as a unit. So what I love about, you know, production is that even if, let's say, you, Jacob, came up with an amazing idea that you're going to turn into a YouTube video, once you throw it out there and once you start building it, it does require a team. whether it be yourself and one person or yourself and friends that you bounce it off of, if it's, your own channel, or if it's yourself and a scriptwriter, an editor, and a, producer. But it's everyone's idea at that point, right? Which I think is really cool. So no matter what you're working on, it's always a shared creative process, which is really nice. I think that's one of the big lessons I've had.
Doesn't that cause also like friction? I mean, if there's so many heads involved and ideas and
I think it
opinions.
can. Yeah, naturally there can be friction with a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But, when it comes to working on cool projects with cool people, it usually flows quite naturally with good communication. That's what it comes down to. That's another big lesson is how to communicate in these environments, especially with lots of things changing at once. I've also learned on the corporate side, uh, you know, how to balance needs of a platform like YouTube with expectations of corporate, I would say, brand identity and that kind of thing. So balancing the creative with the corporate needs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then later on, when you had like more projects at the same time, when you felt okay, it's now feels like it more as a business.
Yeah.
What did you? What surprised you the most about that kind of stage?
Is taxes a fair answer? Honestly, yeah, like that's quite a practical one, but it's super tangible. Taxes were a bit shocking, right? Self-employment and everything, and managing finances, and also being able to say no to work and balance projects, right? Because I think that there's this natural urge when you're freelancing and you know, when you're running your own business in any fashion to just say yes. But it's really important to find balance and to be able to say, hey, maybe I have enough on my plate right now. Maybe this is solid and I'll be okay. I think it was very tough to not say yes to every project that came knocking. And so and just to find the balance, but I think that's part of what moving here, moving from the US to here, I think the pace of life and the pace of work is a bit different, and so it's easier to naturally find balance in projects, and also, um, create that foundation of longer timelines for production work and that kind of thing.
And from a mental perspective, have you had like any doubts or internal challenges you were facing, or before you were putting yourself out there as a freelancer?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example, but essentially, I mean, there's every day is a challenge for for a freelancer in this kind of workflow when you're not sure if the work will be the same tomorrow or if you'll have the same projects, you know? And so I think mentally that's is quite challenging, and there's also the imposter syndrome that comes in a
Mhm.
bit, right? And I've worked at these amazing environments, but I still have so much to learn, and I still want to keep, collaborating with creatives and with creators and with brands to learn from them too. It's not just about me saying yes to projects. It's also about, what can I learn and how can I apply this to the next, right? I think that's yeah, quite huge.
And from a practical point of view, how did you manage more projects at the same time?
Well, coming from someone who's definitely more type B, and less organizational, this is something that I'm still struggling with a bit. I think I try to put as much as I can into notes. I try to write down as much as possible to try to stay organized, but it is kind of tough. I've used, tools like Airtable or Trello or, these different, I would say, more project management softwares. But I don't think I've figured that one out yet. I think that's still a work in progress of how to, keep track of everything and not keep it in my brain. Uh, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I think writing down is the most important thing.
Exactly.
S-
Like,
you mentioned the topics with the taxes. When you started, when your business was growing, and did your relationship with money change in this aspect?
I think that with freelancing, I've become a bit more mindful with spending, both mindful and intentional, I guess, because, when I've gotten a new project in the past, have I gone and spent, the first paycheck and treated myself to things? Yes. But I think it's also a matter of, for me, I'm trying to, save as much as possible and still plan for retirement, right? Because these are things that they're not as natural as an employment contract, for example. So it's again part of the self-employment nature. So those are things that I'm, definitely being much more conservative financially about for 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 those purposes.
But was it something that you knew already that, okay, now I'm self-employed, now I have to take care a bit better of my finances, or was it something that occurred and you noticed it?
Maybe a bit of both. I think that when I started freelancing full time, I did have to create a Google Sheet of every single expenditure that I had because there was this mystery of where was money going. So, I think that that's something, being able to having to save for taxes and that kind of thing is really nice, but it's also a bit tricky, a bit deceiving. And so, I literally until this year had a Google Sheet of every expense. Every time I'd go out and get a coffee, I would open the Google Sheet on my phone and add it in, just keep track. Yeah, yeah. So then I could look and say, oh, okay, this is where all of this went, right? Or, a lot of travel booked, a lot of this, a lot of, XYZ.
My next question would be, how connected do you see your self-worth to your job?
Mm. I think that if you asked me a few years ago on the self-worth, I would have connected it much higher than I do now, but it's something that I'm definitely trying to detach from. At the end of the day, I am really passionate and I love what I do, and I'm very happy doing what I do, but I think that, you know, it's not my identity, and that's something that, sure, I've worked with incredible people and I've had some I'm really grateful for the opportunities I've had, but I definitely don't want that to be, you know, my identity at the end of the day, and so it's something I'm working on, and it's always a work in progress to try to figure out what that is.
You mentioned that Europe has a bit more relaxed work environment. That also leads me to another question, which would be comparing the US and the Europe, like the entrepreneurial environment. People say that's much easier in the US than in Europe. What is your point of view on this?
So I would say if someone's an entrepreneur, it's going to be easy wherever they are. It's going to be easy and hard, but there's very specific challenges in each place. So for example, it's less expensive to start a company, at least from where I'm from in the US, than
Mm,
it is here in Brussels. It's hard to compare. I'm just a case study, so it's really hard to compare all
yeah,
of the
sure.
US and Europe. I do know there's a ton of resources in places like, Silicon Valley, but there's also a ton of resources here in Brussels for entrepreneurs, like Start Labs and these different, startup hubs and really cool environments to learn and grow from, which I definitely was not aware of, at least where I'm from in the US. So I think that there's pros and cons to both, but I think here there's been a bit more resources. It has been a bit of a mystery. It's been more mysterious and less easy bureaucratically, Could that be because I don't know Belgian language yet? Probably, probably. But I think that, yeah, it really depends case by case, I'd say.
Yeah. And also, like from a legal perspective, are you self-employed or do you have founded an LLC?
I founded a company here. It's not considered an LLC. It's a BV or SRL is the Belgian version. I think
Mhm.
it's a little
Yeah,
similar to, yeah,
similar. Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I started here, and then I dissolved. I had an LLC back in the
Hmm.
US that all my work was through, and I dissolved that one. That way I can be, grounded and focused here and really build roots.
So now fully based here in Europe. You don't have any company or whatever in the US anymore.
I still have some ties and things, and I still have some clients back in the US, but everything, all my work is through here. So I'm very, very happy about that.
I don't know. I would be interested in maybe people who are listening too, like founding the company. How much capital did you need, and how was all the process of the creation?
Sure. So in Brussels specifically, it was about 4,000 euros to start the company among notary fees and actual capital that went into a bank account and all of the logistics. In the US, this is a few years ago, so likely inflation's hit this one, but I remember it being around $300 to $400 to start a company, at least in the state of Maryland. Yeah, clearly there's a there's a markup on
Yeah,
on the, I would say, starting a company here, but there's also a lot of advantages and things to having a company versus being self-employed,
of course.
which if I chose to be, let's say, self-employed in Belgium, it would have been less than it would have cost to start an LLC back in the US. So there's different
Okay.
options. I think it's about 150 euros or similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the feeling that in Europe it's still like in most of the countries it's a bit more expensive to start like or to found like an LLC type of company where you limit your liability a bit.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you attracted your clients like along the way since you were like working with Warner Bros. And but still, I would be interested in, for example, how did the Hilton deal emerge?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, LinkedIn has been, and this, I'm not a not a, I would say, like, partner of LinkedIn or anything, but truly it's been a really great place to network, and I found it to be quite organic there. And then also there's a lot of platforms for, let's say, new media jobs in particular, like YT jobs, is a great one. And there's also Roster, which is a startup, and it's a creator hiring platform. And so I've gotten some roles there too, which has been really nice.
Something like Upwork?
Similar, yeah, but more for, I would say, YouTube centric and retainer based or longer term projects versus like a one off on Upwork.
What advice would you give like to people now who wants to start their own business, wants to start being a freelance, moving like from the traditional 9 to 5 job to to being an entrepreneur?
I would say to go all in. I know a lot of people who, I would say are destined to be entrepreneurs and maybe they're stuck or hesitant. And I think that my biggest recommendation would to be, if you can, right, if means allow, and if it's possible, then to really put yourself out there and dive headfirst into entrepreneurship. I think that's the best way to go about it. And it's like there's you. We met off of LinkedIn as well, and there's a lot of amazing people to network with and chat with and learn from and grow from. Right. I think if you have the mindset of continued learning and continued networking, I think that it's harder to fail that way.
I've also heard the other way around that people keep a job and then start your business apart at the same time, and then at some point when you make enough income with your freelance job or your business, then quit the job. What do you think about that?
I think that that's certainly wise and safe, and it depends on the context, right? Like maybe there's children involved that, you need to obviously pay for, housing and food and these kinds of things. But if the context is okay or flexible enough for you to go for it, I would say it's better to try to release yourself from the 9 to 5 or from, the major obligations, just to give yourself time and space to be an entrepreneur and to give yourself, the I would say the context to really grow in that sense, because you do need time, and you need time and energy to go into it. But I think it's really, for me, there's also something about the good pressure, like the healthy pressure of entrepreneurship. There is no 9 to 5 that I can rely on. So I have to keep, working, and I want to. But for me it's good motivation. And so I think that could be another angle to it.
You worked in an industry, or you are still in an industry that it's like really built on attention in the end. How do you protect yourself from being consumed by it? I think that goes in line a bit with what you said, like being on the screen until like or on your laptop until 10.
Yeah. Honestly, full circle moment, because I was talking to a thumbnail designer yesterday, um, about, preferred timelines, like what's the best workflow for us. And they said that 6 hours notice is good, but they sleep between 11:30 and 5:30 a.m. In a certain time zone. And I was like, to me, this is absurd, like if that's 6 hour turnaround is so fast, you know? Um, I'm certainly not working at that speed, and I'm certainly trying to sleep more hours at night. Um, but I think it's just super important to set some type of boundaries and to, yeah, set a foundation where there is a bit more breathing room for the work to be done. Um, for in that case, 24 to 48 hours is just fine. Um, that would work just as well, I would say. Um, so yeah, it's about balance and intention, and also, yeah, I use Apple's screen time alert for sure. And I have my personal social media intake to 15 minutes a day at the
Oh,
moment.
wow.
Um, it's hard to follow it. It's very easy to click the, remind me later, but I think it's helpful to not consume it so much personally, to be able to just, yeah, put the energy into the work. And then at the end of the day, when I'm done work, then I am really happy to be offline, which helps to stay out of, I would say the entertainment side of things other than what I'm curious about or watching.
What are you curious about besides work?
Besides work, I really love, you know, painting, like hands-on creative things, painting. I used to throw pottery back in the US, and travel too. Um, and also I'm a bit of a adrenaline junkie. So,
Already.
yeah, yeah. So I like went to stunt school and I've done skydiving and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, when the opportunities arise, I'm always game for that. It's like sport and that kind of thing, which all require me to be outside and away from at least the sports side. Yeah. So that's I guess what I'm up to outside of work. What do you?
Um,
Yeah, I saw a really good video from Yes Theory years ago. I'm not sure if you know that channel, but they essentially did a beyond a digital detox. It was essentially going and living in a dark cave for, I want to say 48 or 72 hours. No lights. What'd you say? I know it's quite extreme.
there's that kind of over optimization we have in industry. Like we want to do so many things, and I have the feeling it's always you always have to achieve more because otherwise it's not enough. Especially when you go now on social media, Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever. What do you think about that? And does this whole comparison thing influence you?
I mean, it's hard to say no. I think that everyone's influenced by, this comparison things at the moment. Or at the moment. It's Yeah, for me, I try to, um I think a goal for this year is to care a lot less about what other people think of myself, of what I'm doing, and really, yeah, it comes down to intention of what I'm sharing or doing or, and just being more myself. I think I like working with people where I can be 100% myself, otherwise it doesn't make sense, right? And I think that's, um despite, all whatever what media shows and what other people are doing, I think it's important to just stay authentic, right? It's hard to not be influenced, I would say, but I'm working towards being as authentic as possible in every environment.
A completely different topic. I was curious about is the old media. Would you say that it was a male driven industry back then?
I would say a lot of media, old and new, is quite male dominated, I would say, at least in the front end, especially on camera. But on the back end, I would say there's a lot of leading ladies who
Hmm.
are helping support the jobs, and maybe there's less awareness or less, credit because it's less visible, right? But I find it being, yeah, I find it quite balanced, but maybe not balanced on screen, if that makes sense.
Were there any moments where you felt like underestimated?
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and I think that for me, there's how do I even approach this one? I feel like there's a lot, unfortunately, a lot of examples, but it's a lot of time it's more of an age situation, you know? Maybe, you know, I'm perceived too young to do XYZ or something. Or yeah, I think it's interesting because it's always about other people's expectations, you know, and perception. But for me, I'd rather just show up as myself than have to prove myself, you know? At least that's what I've recently come to learn. So
That's what I wanted to ask you. If was that something that you always did, or did you learn that skill along the way?
that's learned for sure. That's learned.
Any advice on that? How to stay more connected to your own voice instead of try to meet external expectations?
Yeah, I'd love to hear 100 people's opinions on this. You know, I feel like I still wanna learn and figure it out, but for me, it's just, yeah, a matter of detaching from, the expectations of other people and just accepting, like, you know, if it's not a good fit, then it's not a good fit, and, uh, and really just working with the right people. Like, for me, it's about good people, good communication, and from that will come really good projects, you know, and fun work.
For you, what does success mean, and has the definition of success changed over the last years?
Definitely it has changed. And how would I define success? I feel like you should ask me again in like 3 years.
We can do that.
Yeah, because I think that this is gonna change, right? But for me, success is about balance and confidence, and feeling excited to work on what I'm working on every day, you know? But it's balance in both a personal and professional sense. So I think success is not just, you know, a professional thought for me. It's more of a, like a life attribute, you know? So very weird way of wording success, but clearly I'm still trying to figure it out.
What would you tell someone who feels like the pull toward independence, but is really scared to do like the first step?
I would say, to do something that makes you very uncomfortable. So, like, if let's say you really wanna launch a YouTube channel, for example, the best thing you can do is to film a video and upload it, you know? You shouldn't waste the time. Obviously, there's strategy and there's planning. So I need to watch my words here because obviously, you know, everything, in the end is important, but there is no YouTube channel if there's no videos. So, yeah, get in front of the camera, get uncomfortable, and just start learning from each experience and get more comfortable with it. But I think forcing the action, or at least one action, is a good way to go about it, right? Because it's easy to get stuck in the pre-production or the planning phase. But if you can do one thing, just get yourself out of the box. Maybe it's skydiving. Maybe it's maybe it's, you know, going out to a restaurant alone. Who knows? But I think something that takes you out of your element and you can prove to yourself that you can do it, then it's easy to take the next step.
As a YouTube expert, what advice would you give, especially in your example? You want to start a YouTube channel, and yeah, you want to grow your brand there, and maybe monetize it at some point.
Yeah, I think, well, YouTube expert's a strong word. I wouldn't say I'm there yet. I'm still working on it, but I think it's super kind of you. I think, I would say I would stick with that advice, right? Like, just start creating and putting content out there. Um, find your audience. It's a very layered question, right? Because it depends, you know,
Mm,
are you a brand or a person?
sure.
What are your goals with YouTube? Do you wanna monetize, or do you wanna build an audience and a community? Or do you want to lead to, you know, sales funnel from YouTube. You know, it really depends. But I think in any of those contexts, the best thing you can do is to be consistent and start uploading, right? And then be consistent with uploading videos.
Is there any amount of videos you should upload?
Yeah, so it's hard to say exactly. I would say the best practice if you're going to start a channel is to launch with a few videos just so there's a bit of a library for an audience to go through if they enjoy one, right? And then to just stay consistent and whatever that looks like for you. I know there's a very successful YouTuber, Alvin Zoe, I believe, who uploads a video once every 6 months or a year. Yeah, and they're these very elegant food-based videos and documentary type. beautifully shot. And yeah, it's more of a rare upload. And he does have a bit of a separate following from other channels and that kind of thing. So that does leverage, but that's a good example of, what consistent means for him. Whereas you see with other channels, they're posting every week. With Jetlag the Game, they upload series at a time. So once a week drops and then they take a break. It really depends. It really depends.
Before going self-employed or before starting your business, what inner work has to be done from your point of view?
So I would say it kind of goes back to my previous thought of going all in, right? Like know what you're signing yourself up for and then commit to it fully. I think that's kind of key to succeed here, even if it is committing fully to 10 hours a week of self-employed work. I think that that's equally as important to doing it, whether it be full-time or in any other fashion. And also, figuring out based on your situation, what are your needs? What's reasonable for you? What's above the baseline, I would say. Knowing when you can take a holiday and when, being able to take a break or to pause and not fear, losing clients or losing work. I think that's also really important. So if you can structure or at least have some sort of framework for what it looks like before you jump all in, that's helpful for sure.
From your point of view, what questions should founders ask themselves more often?
I would say, am I still aligned with the work that I'm doing? Yeah, I think it's something I keep asking myself, and it's what's led to my now projects, right? And the creators that I get to work with, and I'm super excited with every project that I have, and I think that tells me everything, right? And the minute I'm not excited anymore, maybe I'm not aligned, or the minute I start working on a project that maybe I can't get behind, or I don't feel good about producing something, or literally getting the world to see the outcome of the work being done. I think that's my tell personally, right? Of that there's misalignment. But I think in any context, it's important to have those self check-ins and make sure it's not, whether it be a financial drive or a time drive, to essentially protect those things. I think it should be about protecting the passion, right?
Do you have any specific goals in the next few years for Delavie Creative?
I would love to keep working with cool people. It's a very, I would say, generic statement, but that would be the goal. Physically, I would love to help train up other YouTube producers and strategists. And I'd really love to keep networking and share what I know. I don't want to gatekeep anything, because I think this is such a cool space. And we're seeing, BBC, for example, just partnered with YouTube, and Sesame Street's library is on YouTube. And so I think in my industry, old and new media is soon going to just be media, if we can call it that. And so it's my goal, yeah, is to definitely just keep sharing and also keep learning.
We have now reached almost the end of our podcast conversation. I have 5 questions left. The goal is to answer them more or less briefly or quickly.
Okay, I'm on it. I'm a rambler, but I can try my best.
Mm, I must admit, I once 2 of them I copied them from another podcast you might know, but I really like them, and I think it really resonates also to me, and I'm curious to hear your answer. From your point of view, what is the most valuable advice you have ever received?
Jump. I mean, it's that simple, to just jump and do and go.
On the other hand, what is the worst advice you followed for too long?
To stay in a corporate setting.
What is something you're currently struggling with, even though most people wouldn't expect it?
Balancing relationships back in the US. So friendships and family relationships, it's tough abroad.
Yeah. Have you planned to go back to the US soon to visit them?
Yeah, I have a few trips planned this year for weddings and for visits as well.
Well, that's
So
nice.
hopefully that will help with this
Yeah.
predicament.
Question of what advice would you give to someone who wants to start their own project, career change, or freelance journey, but feels paralyzed by fear?
Maybe talk to someone about your fears, you know? I think a lot of fear is kept inside of our heads, and when you bring it to the surface, it's a lot less scary.
And last and final question: if your work disappeared tomorrow, what would still give you meaning?
I would say creativity and, yeah, sharing life with other people.
Great. You really kept them briefly.
Yeah, I try to keep it super concise for you. I'm glad you prefaced it, but a really good way to wrap it up.
Well, thank you so much, Delaney. I really
Thanks,
enjoyed
Jacob.
the time with you.
I'm so glad you asked me to be a part of this, and I'm really excited to see where the podcast goes. I'm proud of you for kicking this off. I think it takes a lot. So congrats to you.
Thank you so much. No, I'm really passionate about it. So happy to have you also like as a guest here. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks. Hope to talk again soon. I appreciate this.